I don't got to heal faster. I got to heal from faster.
Taking your time with healing also kind of ensures that you get to wholeness. Versus if you rush through it, you could miss some things.
So we need to take the time to send us a message that we're worth it. Send ourselves a message that we're worth the time. For so many of us, there's this association with this pain of healing, and we put it off. There's time where it can take a turn from healing as suffering and healing associated with heaviness with healing as pleasure. Healing does not need to be associated with suffering. We're so resistant to change that we're only going to make change if our ass is kicked. Welcome to the In Search of More podcast. I am your host, Eli Nash. Join me weekly on my quest for more from myself and more from this world. We'll see you on the other side.
Eli Nash, we're back. How you feeling?
Good. Is that enough of an answer? Good?
Good is good. Depends though. Is that enough of a response for you? Like, is good? Does that really express how you feel? Feel good?
Dude, we got the YouTube algorithm working against us. We gotta be interesting off the bat. You can't just like make chit chat while we get comfortable and make the point. Otherwise, people just sign off, and then all of this is for nothing, and our self-esteems get shot, and we're gonna start this whole process again.
The whole thing.
Depression sets in. So it's really not a good idea.
Right.
So
what are we talking about today?
Healing, but when I say that word, healing, does it sound like heavy or light? Just between those two.
Sounds pretty heavy.
Bro, we got to change that shit. Right now, we just got to change it. If I say the word learning, heavy or light?
Doable.
What?
Doable.
Learning?
Mm-hmm.
I thought you said, like, I thought you made up some word connected to doing that.
No, learning feels light. Like, I'm always up and ready to learn. Let's go.
Well, I guess it depends. I guess it depends what we're learning.
Right. Depends on what you learn. Right.
But, like, in and of itself, there isn't that.
Yeah, but healing definitely sounds like exhale.
Right. Learning, when I hear the word, so healing, I understand why it sounds heavy. We're trying to change that. That's going to be the purpose of this episode. If you come in and it resonates with you that healing is heavy, and by the end of these, you give us 22 minutes, we'll give you the world. There's, when we were kids, that was the radio station in New York, give you 22 minutes, we'll give you the world. So in these 22 minutes, we will, if it turns out to be 22 minutes, hopefully we'll get to the end of this, and healing doesn't have that connotation anymore. Not because it doesn't for me, but because I'm noticing that it doesn't have to for me. It doesn't have to.
Break that down.
Whereas learning, I will. Whereas learning, go either way. It's not heavy or light.
Right.
Like, tell me what I'm learning.
Right.
Am I learning how to, play basketball? Okay. That sounds fun. Am I learning how to play golf? I'm like,
Right.
Way.
Nothing against golf.
How old do I look?
Right.
So nothing against
golf
Tiger.
gets
Nothing
a bad
against
rap
Tiger.
as like an old man sport.
Nothing against Tiger. I mean, fellow sex addict, man. Why would I bash on him?
He's an amazing human being when you think about his bounce back ability. It's crazy.
Ooh.
Tiger.
Why is he bounced back?
Or he's back out there. His kids starting to take the reins.
Hey.
Yeah, he's playing in tournaments with his kids.
Really?
Yeah,
I did not know that. Yeah, he's had a rough story. Okay, so healing as heavy. I think there's also a connotation of healing as suffering. There's this suffering process through healing. We say like growing pains. There's this pain associated with the growth, and for so many of us, there's this association with this pain of healing, and we put it off. Whereas I would agree that for most of us, the beginning is going to be painful. I don't think there's a way around that. I think that many of us need surgeries from our childhood. So there's infections, there's broken things, and we need surgeries to repair what's going on. And surgeries are painful, and surgeries are suffering, and surgeries are heavy, and everything else. But some of us don't need that. Some of us just need to go to the gym and work out a little bit. Or some of us, after a period of surgeries, then we get to go to the gym.
Yeah, some of us need a diet.
Just diet, right? It does not need to be. That sounds heavy. It doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to be as painful as as we normally associate with it. I had a realization recently where I was feeling like, okay, I got to fix certain things faster. And this came to me, no, I don't got to fix certain things faster. I got to fix this idea of faster in my mind. I don't got to heal faster. I got to heal from faster. This like modern day thing where everything's got to be done right away, super quick, or else it doesn't count. And we come in with this intensity. And I think that so many of us have suffered through our childhoods, through our life, that we associate the healing process as suffering. And that too is something we need to heal from. It doesn't need to be, because, I asked Gabor Mate, and this is a question I intend to ask a lot of the guests who sit down with me, is how do you define healing?
Right.
And he defined it beautifully. He said it's healing comes from the word whole, and it's to kind of integrate back into wholeness. And that's something that it's never really ending, wholeness, because there are new things that have happened in the last couple of months, and then you integrate that into your life, and there's new experiences and they become integrated. So there's always the process of becoming whole, and whole, you can keep going further back in your life, in your heritage, in different places, and incorporate that into a whole as well. There doesn't have to be the heaviness with that. There also doesn't have to be the intensity, the rush with it, whereas
in a lot of ways, taking your time with healing also kind of ensures that you get to wholeness, versus if you rush through it, you could miss some things.
Yeah, sometimes we need to take the time to send us a message that we're worth it, send ourselves a message that we're worth the time.
Yeah, I agree.
This goes back to something we spoke about earlier. We're exactly where we're supposed to be.
Right.
We're exactly where we're supposed to be. It's kind of the same concept, but I think for healing, this was so new for me. Like when I had that thought, I don't need to heal fast, I need to heal from fast, I literally jumped up. Like, this is it. Like, this is the sickness, the disease in the culture, is the toxicity in the culture is so strong that it's brought us to a place that even within our healing, we think we need to heal through suffering, heal fast, heal with urgency. It's like it's damaged that also. Whereas no, this is a process that can totally be at a reasonable pace.
Right.
And I shouldn't even have to say that doesn't mean you don't do anything.
Right.
For a period of time.
Should we always, I guess, aspire to, but should we always get to healed, or is healing enough?
No, it's you've said it before, right? It's always the journey is where it's at. There's always more. In fitness, are you at the top of your game? There's always more. I like to watch the UFC, and you just know that the fighters of today would decimate the fighters from 10 years ago. It's just not the same. The craft is not the same as it was. I wonder how that is with basketball. I know we say Jordan is the best.
Great conversations. People always do. I think so. The game has changed tremendously. Like, it's a small man's game now, right? 1, 2, just the way the game is refereed created a whole different thing now, right? And people like Steph Curry can race to the top of the heap, and physicality is not even really a part of his game, right? But his craft is insane. Like, a lot of people, and a lot of, there's a downside also, because then he becomes, one of the faces of the leagues, and like, people think that's what basketball is, when it's so much more than being able to shoot from any part of behind the 3-point line, right? There's a lot of other things, and he'll say too, like, he puts a lot into his game, but the players of today, are they better? I don't know. That's a good question. It depends. I think you probably got to go case by case. Overall, I think it's less of a team sport now in a lot of ways. They're meaning, like, when I was watching MJ, like, Scottie Pippen was like a real deal. Like, Ron Harper was a real deal. I know, like, the last 2 minutes in a quarter and they're down, Steve Kerr is in there. Right. Like, I know what's going to happen. Nowadays, it's like, give the ball to the superstar every time, the one guy. you know. So I think it's case by case, player by player.
But think about it like this, right? You have the last 30 years of basketball,
Mhm.
and you have film at a technology that didn't exist before. You have medicine at a level that didn't exist before.
Right.
Could LeBron be as like playing at this level without medicine where it was at this age 30 years ago? Is that even possible?
No way. I don't think so.
How did we get into this?
We got into this by the growth, the journey of healing, and how that's always a continuation, like MMA fighters that you like to watch and MMA fighters.
UFC, it just said it's, I don't even remember how I got into it. It's not so important.
It's good though. It's good to break out sometimes in the sports. But no, I think, so I think what I asked was, do we always have to get to healed, or is being in a state of healing?
It's a never-ending process, right? It's a never-ending process. We wouldn't say it. You're right. That was my point there. That, say with the UFC, someone is dominating their craft, but here comes some other. That's a perfect sport. I love that because there's so many different disciplines in the sport coming at you, and like you think you're a great boxer, and all of a sudden you run up against jiu-jitsu, and then you run up against these Dagestani guys, which I don't know what they do to,
right.
But they're going to find the holes in that game also.
Right.
We always do. Eventually that gets there. So the same is true with all disciplines, is that it keeps improving on it. We're done healing. I mean, what does that even mean?
Right.
It doesn't mean anything, but there's a time where it can take a turn from, and I think there's time where it can take a turn from healing as suffering and healing associated with heaviness, with healing as pleasure. It's something we look forward to do. My friend Mayor Kay, who you've met before, has recently become a breathwork therapist, and in a couple of weeks he's doing a breathwork session here. I'm looking forward to that.
Right.
Hey, this can be a cool experience. I know it might be intense. I know it might be all of those things, but that suffering quality, that heaviness of what might come up and what am I going to have to process, that doesn't have to be there anymore. And I think it's important, again, as different parts of the hills are ascended by us, that we can call back to some who are early on in their journey and say, hey, the suffering of healing doesn't need to last forever. It really doesn't. Healing does not need to be associated with suffering. For many of us, and I'm thinking back a couple of years ago, it wasn't like a huge deal, but it hit me really hard. So at work, there was, we got one of these spoof emails at work from a fake account saying, hey, our banking details changed and blah, 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 blah. And we somehow fell for it. Okay. And we wired, it wasn't a huge amount of money, but we wired this account money. We called the bank. Actually, it wasn't a wire. It was an ACH. So it was caught the next day and we got it back. So for whatever reason, this kind of hit me hard, like this whole experience. And what bothered me, the thought that kept going through my head is, if this can happen at work, meaning this is so obvious, this is 101. Every person in the finance department, every person in sales, like we're not at this for a year. Every single person in the company should know that if you get a rushed email to change wire instructions, do nothing.
Right.
And yeah, there were some things that were pretty good. The guy had the tracking number that the account shipped in. I'm not going to give all the tools, tips and tricks to it, but even so, it should not have got through us. Like, just the urgency should have been known. Like, no, we're doing business with this guy for 5 years. If there's any urgency to a wire, ask 10 questions. Like, why does it make a difference if a wire is sent now or in an hour? What is going on? Once you get that kind of message, then speak to a few people, get on the phone with someone, meet in person, something. Don't get fooled by this. And the thought in my head was, if this is not going right, what else is not going right? And as I processed that, I realized that there were a bunch of changes in the business that I already knew had to be made, but I wasn't comfortable enough to make the changes.
Right.
Why? Because they required some confrontation, some uncomfortable conversations, some uncomfortable realizations, some dealing with things that are not the fun part of the job, but I already knew it.
And this was the catalyst? This It's ACH.
This was a catalyst to the thought process. Was once this happened, then I was first kind of beat up and consumed by it for a little bit. And then I realized the thought that was beating me up was, if this is wrong, what else is wrong? Like, what else? If I'm trusting this team to manage the money and the business and the inventory, and something so basic like this can get through, what else is not being taken care of? So that's the thought.
Right.
And then that what else became, I know what else I've been sitting on that I've already identified as issues in the company that I have not done anything about because of laziness, fear of confrontation, just not wanting to deal with it, procrastination, or all the many reasons we push off what we know we need to do. Then from this place of discomfort, I commit that week that I'm going to make those changes. And during the course of that week, I do that. Mm-hmm. So this was a very minor price to pay financially. Like, I think we lost like $25 in the transaction for a fee or something.
Yeah.
It was very minor price to pay financially. It could have been a lot worse had we not retrieved the wire, or had the wire been much more. It's a very minor place, but emotionally there was a toll it took on me where it consumed me for several days. And I remember thinking after that, like, I wrote a letter to myself, which I sometimes do, and saying that, you know, what I want for myself is to no longer need discomfort in order to make the changes I need to make. We shouldn't need to go to a doctor to tell us that we have high cholesterol, we're at 75% greater chance of a heart attack if we don't lose our weight, for me to say, like, dude, this isn't right.
Right.
It's got to go. Like, why do we need we know it's coming.
Right.
We know it's freaking coming. So, and the point I'm trying to make with that is that we shouldn't need suffering to learn, but so many of us do. Our association with change, we're so resistant to change that we're only going to make change if our ass is kicked. If you force me to change, then I'll absolutely change.
Right.
What I'm saying about healing is that can heal too. That thing is an illness.
Right.
That we're so resistant to change that we need to be, like, you know, pulled away from where we're at physically, forced to look in a different direction. There's something, I have a visual of you saying something like this, of being forced to change.
Yeah, either change or get forced to change.
No, but you said it's like sending a message to people, like, this was my story, that I was forced to change. I only changed when I was forced to change.
Yeah, that's happened to me before in my life for sure. And it was hard. Like, I don't wish it on anybody. Just having no other option. It's like, you change now, or okay, you lose it all. Like, tomorrow you're going to lose everything.
Then you change.
And then it's like, okay, all right, fine. And
okay, so could you change without that?
100%. The signals, the warnings were there. Like you said, like, I didn't have to go to the doctor to say, like, yo, you're overweight, you're at risk, or whatever. Like, there were signals, things being said, situations happening, patterns. And I just chose to ignore it. But it's,
so what is a signal?
Making uncomfortable decisions, like, meaning the discomfort in the decision was behind it. It was like what I needed to do. So, but what I will say is, one of the things you mentioned was like fear of confrontation. So for me, it was confronting certain issues, right? Or dealing with certain issues, the risk of confrontation from other people, from internal, and like, I don't want to deal with it, I'll just push it off. Until it got to a boiling point, you know, in my relationship, my wife, certain financial situations that I pushed off, and now it's like, okay, any money that's coming in is getting devoured by these 2-3 things because you didn't do something about it, right?
By mistakes.
Yeah. And now you're like, all right.
So now you learned a lesson that you knew. Mm-hmm. You knew it before. It was obvious that those were issues, but now it came to a head.
Right.
So now you're paying a price, and you have a daily reminder, a weekly reminder, a monthly reminder that those mistakes will cost you, so get ahead of it.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And I think about like a situation that I had one time where like, I owed some money to one of my whatever, right? Like, one of my creditors, if you will. And I was like a bit late. I was a little late on it, but like, I ignored the guy for a little while because I didn't have an answer. And it kind of made things worse, right? Because my thought process was like, I'll talk to him when I got the money, right? I'll deal with it when I got the money.
Very worst thing to do with creditors.
Bro.
Being on the other end of it.
It's the worst.
Ignoring is the worst.
Something like that happened again where it wasn't my fault, but like someone else in a separate business that I have, they were traveling. They didn't get a chance to send in the payment. And I saw he called, I didn't answer, and then he sent an email. And then I remember how this went before. So I picked up the phone. I'm like, hey, Mr. Ortega, I got you. Give me 2 days. He's like, cool, I'll give you 5. And I remember hanging up the phone like, oh man, like that's amazing, right? So in that moment, like I definitely learned a lesson. I'm grateful that I learned the lesson. And now I deal with that situation differently. But back then, the fear of confrontation was like, I don't want to deal with this. You know, it was hard. So yeah, I think we definitely, it's easier to kind of like wait until the last moment to change and like suffer through everything.
So I would say something different, that even the alert coming early is still an association of pain in order to change. Meaning, so I want the perfect business, right? Everyone does, but that like the ideal, a business that, you know, makes a ton of money, works well, operates effectively, employees are happy, employees are growing, right? All of that stuff. We're tackling new opportunities. Everyone wants this. Now, what happened with this money going to the wrong place let me realize that there were issues. And then I was motivated by fixing those issues. And the question is, how loud did the alarm had to get before I made the change in my business? Okay, let's flip it on its head entirely,
right,
and say I don't need the problem at all in order to be motivated to do what it is I want to do. Meaning, I can be motivated not by fixing a problem. I can be motivated by the opportunity to create. It's not never wanting to be broke that pushes me to go to work. It's the possibility of what can be created that pushes me to go to work. Meaning the whole association can just be ripped away. We're no longer trying to fix problems, heal wounds, repair broken things. We're trying to create something positive. And that can be as much of a pull.
Right.
As.
And I'll pull that even further back. I'll pull that 30,000 feet back and I'll look at, I can say, like within the Black community, like suffrage and suffering is sort of like glorified almost, like it's part of our identity.
Martyrdom in some way?
Not even that, just like my life is hard because I'm Black and I gotta suffer through these things. And like, it's almost like for me, for a lot of people, right? Like within the community, it's like suffering equals like the only roadmap to like a victory, a win. Like in order for me to win, I got to suffer through this.
Right.
And that's the only way. And I don't subscribe to that anymore, right? You can learn your lessons. You can listen to the warnings early and you don't have to suffer through certain things. You can heal so your kids don't got to suffer through certain things. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, we got like this weird love affair in the Black community with like suffering. You hear it a lot of times in the music, right? And that's a bigger, deeper conversation around programming and stuff, I feel like. But oftentimes, like and I feel like the roots for sure are let's say like rap music or hip hop music. The roots are like kind of rooted in this battle cry, this perseverance, like songs of freedom almost, like we will overcome type of thing. And like this is our environment. We're shedding a light on it. We're talking about it. It's roots now.
So it's got to be done the hard way.
Right, but now it's more glorified. Like, this only works if I suffer through it.
Someone asked me last week, is plant medicine a shortcut? And I said, let's say it is. Let's say it is. I mean, I took a car to get here, right? Is that a shortcut?
Right.
Like, are we allowed to, or do you got to suffer through everything? How much longer do I have to suffer? Do we have to suffer in order to say, enough is enough, I'm going to try a different way?
Right.
Does suffering have to be the only way, or can I take a shortcut?
Right.
I'm sure someone else took a shortcut on me.
For sure.
Right. Meaning, like on the other end of that, we probably got hurt in a shortened way.
Right. Yeah. No, it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be hard.
It used to take a lot of time to create a sex addict. A lot.
Mm.
Where were they going to get the material? And now it's like
overnight almost.
Overnight, shortcut to sex addiction. Here you go. Freaking 6-inch screen, high def in your house. Not enough for you, put on the VR goggles. There you go. You're in the scene.
Right.
Freaking shortcut to sex addiction. And I've witnessed it myself in the age of the people who are coming into meetings when I started coming in. So understand, I started coming to meetings in 2013. The iPhone was released in 2007. When I came into meetings, I was considered young. I was 27, 28 years old. Mm-hmm. I was considered young. Most of the sex addicts were 50s, 60s, 70s, because it took time for the addiction to develop, right, so to speak. And the internet supercharged it, a shortcut to addiction 5, 6, 7 years later. And that's a long time, right? So come 2019, 2020, 2021, now it's not the iPhone is out for 6 years. Now the iPhone is out for 13 years,
right,
14 years. I see kids coming in 19, 20, 21. We had a couple of times the meeting was 18 or older. We had a couple of times there were kids who came in under 18 and said, "Listen, we'd love to help you, but it's 18 or older in the room."
That's
so
crazy.
That's a shortcut. So we can take advantage of shortcuts.
Yeah.
On the other side, it's the same idea. It's why does it have to be so freaking tough? And I guess you're saying that what you've identified as within the Black community, it's that like
a lot of us
get up and go. Let's work. If we're not suffering, we're not doing.
Right. That's a narrative for a lot of us. For sure, it was for me at one point. Like I was in love with my suffering in a lot of ways, like because it meant this sort of like validation to like once I make it out of it, the world's gonna be at my my doorstep.
And this is my point: this is one more thing to heal from.
Right.
This is one more thing that needs to be healed. This idea that it's got to be so tough. It's got to be such a struggle. One of the questions I ask myself, and I hear very often, especially amongst wealthy people who are thinking about entering a program of addiction, and if they've begun to have some awareness, yes, so I'm talking to those guys, those guys who are, in a state that life is good in certain aspects, but they know that emotionally it's not right, or their relationships with their wife or kids or spouse, whatever it is, aren't right, and they want to make a change. But on the other hand, I identified this when I came into recovery, and I've heard it from several wealthy people who are thinking about embarking on it, is I know that my insecurity is what has allowed me to create my life. There's that awareness now that what drove them in the office every single day was this quality that they were running away from certain aspects of their childhood or wanting to make sure that they were never in that space again. And I saw for myself, I had this such lack of trust in people that I did not want to have to depend on anyone for anything in my whole life. As a matter of fact, I made that promise once after an interaction with my dad. I made a promise that I will never rely on anyone for anything in my whole life. And that drive for independence is what got me working. I started my company at 20 years old because I said, I don't want to rely on anyone. I never want to be in a situation where I'm at the mercy of someone else in order to make something happen in my life. That's not a good, healthy approach to life. It's the same reason why I needed years of therapy and all sorts of other healing in order to be able to have a relationship, because I didn't want to depend on anyone. And then I found these other things to depend on.
Right.
Sex, for example, other addictions. It's one of the beliefs of, I believe, every addict is that I cannot depend on others. That I cannot depend on others for me turned into a fierce drive for independence. That for me turned into a drive for money. So as I start coming into recovery, and again, I'm speaking to other people who are sharing the same thing with me, they're saying, hey, if I go down this path, and I want the healing, I don't want the anxiety, I don't want to have to drink every single night, I don't want to be in this space, but if I go down that path, is my insecurity going to be healed, and then I'm no longer going to have a drive for work?
All right.
So there's two answers to that question. One is maybe, but you might heal that, meaning it might take away your drive, but you're also looking at it from a viewpoint of, I'm not going to feel okay without money, but that might get healed too.
Right.
And you actually may very well not have that attachment. What's that? You mentioned about rap music. Did you? What's it? I think it's a rap song. Did you make the money, or did the money make you?
Right. It's been said.
Wow.
It's been said for sure.
So it's right. It's that same idea. At some point, that can be healed too, where we say, "Hey, my identity is so caught up with this, doesn't need it." That's one. But it's hard to envision that world when we're so attached to something. To think that variable can change, it almost feels like a fact, not an opinion or a belief. It's like, this is as true as the sun rises in the east. You can't tell me that I can be okay without all these trappings that I have in my life. That can heal too. The second, and this is what I found, is for a period of time, yes, the motivation disappears because the motivation is coming from wanting to avoid pain.
Right.
And eventually, if we heal, we can heal that. And we're not looking to avoid that. We're not running away with the same intensity anymore. We don't have that same trauma. I'm not as afraid, like for example, in my case, I'm not as afraid of having a relationship with some dependence, healthy dependence, that I'm as driven by the need for independence, which was my drive for money. But then something else happened. Inside that vacuum, like a forward pull pulls you, almost a vision, and saying, hey, this is what you can create. And then that becomes the pull. And that becomes what we're working towards. So maybe healing isn't even the right word. Maybe we use a word like growing. And for a while, we're growing for the need to heal and to fix something. And then afterwards, we're growing because of possibility. It's like, holy shit.
Right.
It's not just possible not to be broke. It's like possible to
be happy,
help a ton of other people not be broke.
Right.
Like the world's our oyster. Like what we can do is huge. And eventually that capacity and that potential and that possibility is what starts pulling us.
Right. Yeah. And what's coming up for me is just the separation or the difference in like the wants and needs that are like maybe, let's say, rooted on intangible things. Like, right, like I'm suffering when I get out of it means I'm rich or I'm wealthy or whatever, versus like quality of life. Right. So like even for me, like my quality of life is improved in ways that are not tangible, right? Like improve relationships. Like I'm better with myself, by myself. Like, you know, my awareness, right, has changed and my perspectives have changed. And by extension, you know, I'm making more money because like who knows what this stuff touches when you're not healed, and like it affects all these different areas.
Or maybe you're not, and it doesn't matter as much. Meaning maybe you're doing some things that don't have any quality of making money. Right. But you're enjoying that.
Right, for sure.
And that's giving you fulfillment, and that's your quality of life. Because what do you want money for?
Better quality of life. Yeah. Right. 100%.
And you can have that.
Have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah. I was speaking to someone who's, you know, struggling a lot with, he's been growing financially, but he's like kind of always behind the eight ball. Mm-hmm. You know, he's like getting the raise the year after he has the kid. I was like, man, if only I was making this money before I was married, everything would be good. Right. But the mindset is always, you know, just enough. And he's stuck in that. As I was talking to him, and it's like, why do you want the money? He's like, so I want to buy a house. Why do you want to buy a house? What do you mean? Why should I want to buy a house? You said you want to buy a house. You're the one stressed. You're losing sleep over not having a house. I think you should have 10 houses. I just want to know why you're losing sleep over this. What is it about? It's like, well, I want to give my kids a house one day. Why? Because I want to set them up for life properly. You ever thought that your kids don't need that from you? Because I said, what? I said, you know what your kids need from you? I said, what? I said, presence. You be present. But right now you're not there. Why? Because you're stressed about buying them a house that they don't need. They need your freaking presence. Right. So half the time what we want is available to us anyway. Obviously, for things like food and other stuff, yeah, that's a big freaking deal. Get out of your house and make that happen. But for some of these things he's losing sleep over, if you connect the dots, you can have it today. You can give your kid much more than a house will ever give him. Right. The gift of your full.
Yeah, and that makes me think about how many times you hear, read about like the wealthy people saying like it's not about money. Like I got all the money and now it doesn't matter. It's all these other things. Or you see,
easy to say when you got a lot of money.
Easy to say when you got a lot of money, for sure.
But there's an aspect that's true.
Yeah, you see people with all these things, like these wealthy folks, and then like you read that they committed suicide. And you're like, what's happening inside, you know? Think about Anthony Bourdain, who was the best job in the world, travels the world, eats food and gets paid, and is like a lot. And yeah, obviously there can be other things at play, right?
Sure.
But it just kind of goes to show that healing is something that is uber important, and it's necessary to get to a point where, like, yeah, you don't have to suffer through things and whatever, and the importance of healing affects every aspect of our lives, right? Like, obviously, but like really understand the depth of that, right? Like, as you heal through stuff, like something that you're not even looking at gets healed maybe, and then it manifests in something else, you know?
What's the meat on that?
Like, for example, I improved, worked on proactively the communication between me and my wife. Right. And in improving that communication between us, it aligned. And then she was able to support me in a way where by a byproduct of that was scaling my business. Because now like the miscommunication was causing so much friction and stuff. And it's like, I'm trying to do this, but it's because we weren't aligned, which comes from communication. So she's like, I need you over here. And
right. She's got a lot of skills on the business side that you can benefit from.
And that too, for
without
sure.
Without the communication.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, she manages parts of the business that I couldn't even think of, you know, and I wouldn't even think of even asking her.
Before.
Even though I knew this is one of her skill sets before, whatever, I got it. Now
right, and that's true as well, is that when we sort, right, someone who goes to the gym after a knee surgery, say, okay, I need to rehab my knee to walk again, they're not only going to find that the rest of their body becomes healthier, but their mood changes and their mood improves because now they're exercising. So the benefits of fixing a problem are much more than the problem that we've fixed. Yeah, that's often the case. Have we met our goal, like our objective here? Will someone have listened to this and come in? Will someone who was in the place of healing is always suffering, and this association, this heaviness, is like, okay, I got to do this again. I got to do a little bit more of that. Will they have listened to everything we said? Is it the possibility that they say, okay, hey, maybe this is a different way?
I hope so. I hope so, because it's a real thing. We've both lived through it. We're speaking from experience.
100%.